In the ancient lands of the Sahel, where the scorching sun bleeds the color from the sky and the desert wind whispers secrets that no living soul should hear, there lived a man whose greatest gift would become his ultimate curse. His name was Emeka. Emeka was not an ordinary man. He was a hunter, one of the finest in his village. His spear flew true, his tracking skills were legendary, and his courage was unquestioned. He had fed widows and orphans through countless dry seasons. He had protected his village from leopards and hyenas. He was, by all measures, a hero. But Emeka had one fatal flaw. He could not stop talking. From the moment the sun rose until the stars claimed the night sky, Emeka's mouth moved like the wings of a hummingbird, constant, rapid, relentless. While other hunters moved through the bush in reverent silence, respecting the ancient spirits of the land, Emeka filled every moment with chatter. "Words are life," he would declare, slapping his thigh and laughing. "A silent man is a dead man. The tongue is the body's most powerful muscle." His wife, Chioma, a patient woman with kind eyes and graying hair, would often place her hand gently over his mouth at night. "Husband," she would whisper, "the ancestors are trying to sleep. Let there be silence at least until dawn." But even as Emeka promised to be quiet, his mind was already composing the next day's stories, rehearsing his jokes, planning his commentary on everything and nothing. The village elders watched him with growing concern. Old Nana Gloria, the wisest woman in the village, pulled him aside one sweltering afternoon. "Emeka, my child," she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "There is an old saying, the mouth that eats too much fish will one day swallow a bone. Your tongue dances too freely. Words have power. They can heal, yes, but they can also destroy. Learn silence. Learn when to speak and when to listen." Emeka smiled, unable to help himself. "Respected grandmother, I understand your concern, but really, what harm can words do? They're just air, just sound. Better to speak and be heard than to remain silent and be forgotten." Nana Gloria's eyes darkened with sadness. She shook her head slowly. "Then may the ancestors protect you from yourself, child, for I cannot." 3 weeks later, during the harshest part of the dry season, when even hope seemed to wither in the heat, Emeka set out to hunt. The village needed meat desperately. Children's ribs showed through their skin. Mother's milk had dried up. It was a time of silent suffering. But not for Emeka. "Ha! This heat?" he said to no one, to everyone, to the empty desert itself. "This is nothing. I remember the drought of my grandfather's time. Now that was heat. They say the river stones themselves burst into flames. Of course, I wasn't born yet, but the stories, ho, the stories." He talked as he tracked. He talked as he walked. He filled the desert silence with his endless stream of consciousness, oblivious to the way the air itself seemed to recoil from his words. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, becoming a merciless white eye. Emeka's waterskin grew light. His lips cracked. His tongue felt thick. Still, he talked. "Just over this next dune," he muttered, his voice growing hoarse. "Or perhaps the next one. Gazelles have to drink sometime, have to rest, have to—" He stopped. Before him, half buried in the sand beneath the skeletal remains of an acacia tree, lay a human skull. The bone was bleached white, polished smooth by years of wind and sand. The empty eye sockets stared at nothing. The jaw hung open in a silent scream. or perhaps a silent warning. A smarter man would have whispered a prayer. A wiser man would have poured water on the skull as an offering and moved on. A humble man would have recognized the presence of death and treated it with respect. But Emeka was not thinking about wisdom or humility. His exhaustion had made him reckless, and his inability to judge situations had made him foolish. He kicked the skull. Not hard, but carelessly, the way you might kick a stone. "Well, old bones," Emeka said, his voice echoing in the emptiness, "what brought you to this miserable end? Did you talk too much like me? Did your mouth write a check your body couldn't cash?" He laughed at his own joke, the sound harsh and out of place in the sacred silence of the desert. And then the skull's jaw moved. A voice emerged, not from a throat, for there was no throat, not from lungs, for there were no lungs. The voice came from somewhere beyond death itself, dry as ancient parchment, cold as the spaces between stars. Talking brought me here. 4 words. Simple, terrible, true. Emeka's blood turned to ice water. His spear fell from nerveless fingers. His heart hammered against his ribs like a prisoner beating against cell bars. For the first time in his entire life, Emeka was completely, utterly, paralyzingly silent. He stood frozen, staring at the skull, waiting for it to speak again, to explain, to make sense of the impossible thing that had just happened. The skull said nothing more. It was just bone, just death, just silence. Seconds stretched into minutes. Emeka's mind, which usually moved at the speed of his tongue, now raced even faster. Fear and shock battled with something else, something darker and more dangerous. It was excitement. "A talking skull," he whispered, his voice shaking. Then louder, "A talking skull!" And then, shouting to the empty desert, "I found a talking skull!" His hands trembled as he reached down and lifted the skull carefully, reverently, as if holding a treasure beyond price, which in his mind it was. "Do you know what this means?" he asked the skull, which naturally didn't answer. "These changes everything. I'll be famous, the greatest discovery in the history of our people. Chiefs and kings will summon me. They'll write songs about Emeka the Finder, Emeka the Wise, Emeka who discovered the impossible." He shook the skull gently. "Speak again, please. Tell me your secrets. Tell me how the dead can talk. Tell me—" But there was nothing. The skull remained as dead and silent as it had been for years before Emeka found it. But Emeka's mind was already spinning fantasies of glory. In his imagination, he saw himself standing before great gatherings, the skull speaking its mysteries, everyone treating him with the respect and reverence they currently gave to the elders and holy men. He never stopped to wonder why the skull had warned him. He never questioned what "talking brought me here" truly meant. His ego, his endless hunger for recognition, his inability to think before speaking, all of these blinded him to the obvious truth. This was not a gift. This was a warning. Emeka ran. He ran through the desert heat, clutching the skull to his chest, his water skin forgotten, his hunger forgotten, his original purpose forgotten. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs trembled, but his excitement never dimmed. When Emeka burst into the village, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. His arrival caused immediate concern. His clothes were torn, his skin scratched and bleeding, his eyes wild with an almost feverish light. "Everyone!" he shouted, his voice cracking. Come quickly! Gather round! I have found a wonder, a miracle! The villagers emerged slowly from their homes. Some came out of curiosity. Others came out of concern for Emeka's sanity. Old Nana Gloria came, leaning heavily on her walking stick, her face etched with worry. Chioma, Emeka's wife, pushed through the crowd, her face pale with fear. "Husband, what has happened? You're hurt. Come inside, let me—" "No time," Emeka interrupted, holding up the skull triumphantly. "Look! Look at this!" The crowd pressed closer. Someone gasped. Others made signs against evil spirits. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Through the crowd came Chief Kofi, massive as a baobab tree, his body carved from decades of warfare and hard leadership. Scars crossed his chest like roads on a map. His eyes, usually warm, were now cold and calculating. "Emeka," the chief's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "What is the meaning of this disturbance? Why do you wave a skull about like a madman? Have you been drinking fermented palm wine in the heat?" "No, great chief!" Emeka's voice was breathless, ecstatic. "This is no ordinary skull. This skull speaks. It talks. It answered my question in the desert." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some laughed nervously. Others looked at Emeka with pity, assuming the sun had cooked his brain. Chief Kofi's expression darkened. "You disturb the entire village's peace, cause alarm and chaos because you claim that a dead thing speaks. Choose your next words very carefully, Emeka." But Emeka, lost in his visions of glory, didn't hear the warning in the chief's tone. "I swear it on my ancestors' graves, on my children's lives. This skull spoke to me. It said," and he paused dramatically, savoring the moment. "It said, 'Talking brought me here.'" A chill wind swept through the village, despite the evening's heat. Somewhere, a dog howled. An owl called, once, twice. A bad omen. Nana Gloria closed her eyes and whispered prayers to the ancestors. Chief Kofi stepped forward, towering over Emeka. His voice dropped to a whisper, and somehow that whisper was more terrifying than any shout could be. "Emeka, in our village, we have laws. Ancient laws, sacred laws. One of these laws states that anyone who wastes the chief's time with deliberate lies, anyone who disturbs the community with false alarms, anyone who makes fools of the elders for their own amusement." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Such a person is put to death." The color drained from Emeka's face. Suddenly, his visions of glory shattered like dropped pottery. "Great Chief, please, I'm not lying. I swear I'm not. The skull spoke. I heard it with my own ears. Just ask it. Ask it yourself." "Very well." The chief's voice was flat, emotionless. "I will give you this one chance. If the skull speaks, you will be vindicated. If it remains silent—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The chief took the skull from Emeka's trembling hands and held it up before the entire village. The crowd pressed closer, some hoping for a miracle, others already preparing for the funeral rites.
"Skull," Chief Kofi intoned, his voice carrying across the gathering. "If you have the power of speech, if you truly spoke to this man, speak now. Answer me. Why did you die?" Silence everywhere, tense and complete devastating silence. The skull sat in the chief's massive hands, as dead and mute as any bone. Its empty eye sockets stared at nothing. Its jaw hung slack. It was just death, just decay, just the inevitable end that comes to all living things. "Speak!" Emeka screamed, his voice breaking with desperation. Tell them what you told me, please!" Nothing. The skull might as well have been a stone. Emeka fell to his knees, clutching at the chief's robes. Tears streamed down his face, cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "Great Chief, I beg you. I'm not lying. I don't know why it won't speak now, but it did before. It did. Give me time. Perhaps if we wait. Perhaps if—" "Enough." Chief Kofi's word fell like an executioner's blade. He turned to his warriors, men who had fought beside him in countless battles. "Take him to the execution ground." Strong hands grabbed Emeka's arms. He struggled, but he was exhausted from his desert run, weak from fear, and there were too many of them. They dragged him through the village as he screamed and pleaded. "Please, no! I have a wife, children. I'm not a liar. The skull spoke. It did. Mother!" He caught sight of Nana Gloria in the crowd. "Mother, you know me. Tell them I wouldn't lie about something like this. Tell them!" But Nana Gloria only wept, her old face crumbling with sorrow. She had warned him. She had tried. But some lessons come too late. Chioma, Emeka's wife, broke through the crowd and ran to him, her face destroyed by grief. "I will care for the children," she sobbed, touching his face one last time. "I will tell them their father was brave, that he fed the hungry, that he protected the weak. They will remember you with honor." "I don't want honor," Emeka screamed. "I want to live. I want to see my children grow. I want—" But the warriors pulled him away, toward the edge of the village where the execution ground waited, a place of dust and death where justice was carried out according to ancient law. The execution ground was a flat space, cleared of all vegetation, marked by ancient stones arranged in a circle. Stones that had witnessed countless deaths across the generations. The earth there was stained dark, though whether from blood or age, no one could say. They forced Emeka to his knees in the center of the circle. The entire village gathered around, for this was not entertainment. This was a solemn duty, a reminder that laws existed for reasons, that communities survived through order. The executioner stepped forward. His name was Kofi the Younger, the chief's nephew, a man who took no pleasure in his grim work, but performed it with efficiency born from duty.
He carried a blade that had ended 17 lives before this night. It was polished to a mirror shine, blessed by the priests, sharp enough to sever a thread of silk in the wind. He raised the blade above his head. The metal caught the moonlight, seeming to glow with supernatural fire. Emeka closed his eyes. In his mind he saw his children's faces, his daughter who laughed like bells, his son who asked endless questions. He saw Chioma, his patient wife who had loved him despite his flaws. He saw his mother, long dead, waiting for him in the spirit world. Would she welcome him, or would she turn away in shame? "I'm sorry," he whispered to all of them. "I'm so sorry. I should have learned silence. I should have listened. I should have—" "Wait!" Chief Kofi's voice cut through the night. The executioner's blade paused at the apex of its swing. Every eye turned to the chief, who walked slowly into the circle, the skull still in his hands. "I will grant you one final mercy, Emeka. One last chance, though you deserve none. If this skull speaks before the blade falls, you will live. If it remains silent, you die. There will be no appeals, no delays, no more chances. This is my judgment." He held the skull up high, so all could see. Then, in a voice that carried across the execution ground and beyond, to where the spirits surely watched from the shadows, he called out, "Skull, if you have the power of speech, if you truly spoke to this man, speak now. Speak and save him. Speak, or his blood will water this ground." The world held its breath. The wind died. The insects fell silent. Even the distant hyenas stopped their night songs. Time itself seemed to stop, balanced on a knife's edge between life and death. Emeka, his eyes squeezed shut, prayed to every god and ancestor he had ever heard of. He made promises he knew he could never keep. He bargained with the universe itself. And then it happens. The skull's jaw moved. That same voice, dry as desert wind, cold as death itself, filled with terrible knowledge, emerged from the skull's empty mouth. Did I not tell you? Talking brought me here. The executioner dropped his blade. It fell to the earth with a dull thud, forgotten. Chief Kofi staggered backward, dropping the skull, his face twisted in terror. The skull rolled across the ground, coming to rest at Emeka's knees, its empty eyes staring up at him. The crowd erupted in chaos. People screamed, some fainted, others ran, convinced that evil spirits had been unleashed. Mothers grabbed their children and fled. Warriors who had faced lions without flinching now trembled like leaves. In the confusion, Emeka's bonds were forgotten. His guards had released him, backing away from the speaking skull as if it carried plague. For a moment, Emeka simply knelt there, staring at the skull, vindicated but not victorious. His mouth opened and closed, but for once, perhaps the first time in his life, he had absolutely nothing to say. Then survival instinct kicked in. He scrambled to his feet and ran. He ran faster than he had ever run, faster than when he hunted gazelles, faster than when he had discovered the skull. He ran from the execution ground, from the village, from the skull's terrible wisdom. He ran until the screams faded behind him, until the torchlight was just a distant glow, until his legs gave out and he collapsed in the sand, gasping, sobbing, alive. Emeka lay in the sand for hours, maybe longer. Time lost all meaning. Above him, the stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama. The moon sank toward the horizon. The night grew cold, then colder still. When he finally sat up, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming, his first dawn as a man who had looked into death's face and survived. But at what cost? Emeka thought about the skull's words. Talking brought me here. For the first time, he truly understood. The skull had not been showing off. It had not been performing a trick. It had been giving a warning, the most important warning of all. That person, whoever they had been in life, had died because of their words. Perhaps they had spoken secrets they shouldn't have shared. Perhaps they had insulted someone powerful. Perhaps, like Emeka, they simply couldn't learn when to be silent. And now Emeka understood. The skull had spoken not to save him, but to teach him. When Emeka finally returned to his village 3 days later, he was a changed man. The people who saw him barely recognized him. His eyes, once bright with constant amusement and commentary, were now deep and thoughtful. His mouth, which never stopped moving, was pressed into a thin line. He walked directly to Chief Kofi's compound and knelt before him without saying a word. The chief studied him for a long moment. "Why did you return, Emeka? You were free. You could have gone to another village, started a new life where no one knew your story." Emeka opened his mouth, then closed it. He considered his words carefully, perhaps for the first time in his life. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, measured, heavy with hard-won wisdom. "Because running would have taught me nothing, great chief. The skull's warning was for me, not about me. I understand now. Words have power. They can kill as surely as any spear. I returned to learn silence, to listen more than I speak, to honor the lesson that almost cost me my life." Chief Kofi nodded slowly. "You have learned what many never learned, that wisdom often comes dressed in tragedy, and the hardest truths are taught by death itself. You may stay, Emeka, but you will live under one condition. You must serve as the village's silent guardian."
You will patrol our borders. You'll hunt for the widows and orphans. And you will do all of this without unnecessary speech. When you must speak, you will speak with purpose. When you can be silent, you will embrace silence. Do you accept these terms?" Emeka bowed his head. "I accept." And he kept his word. From that day forward, Emeka was known throughout the land as the Silent Hunter. He became a legend, not for his words, but for his lack of them. When young men came to him seeking advice about hunting, about life, about how to impress the elders, he would often answer with just a look, a gesture, a meaningful silence that said more than speeches ever could. Children would ask him, "Uncle Emeka, why don't you talk anymore? We heard you once talked enough for 10 men." And Emeka would smile, a sad smile, a wise smile, and say only this: "I learned that the mouth can dig a grave faster than any shovel. Better to build with silence than destroy with words." As for the skull, no one knows what happened to it. Some say it was buried with full honors in a place known only to the chief and the priests. Others claim it disappeared that night, walking away on legs of wind and shadow, seeking the next fool who needed to learn its lesson. But the story lived on. It spread from village to village, across rivers and mountains, through kingdoms and deserts. It became a warning tale that mothers told their children, that elders shared around fires, that teachers used to instruct the young. And sometimes, in the deep desert, travelers swear they hear a voice on the wind, dry as ancient parchment, cold as death itself, whispering 4 words that echo across the sands. Talking brought me here. It is a reminder, a warning, a truth that transcends time and place. Because in the end, we all carry skulls beneath our skin. We are all just bones waiting to happen. And the question that haunts every life is this: when your skull lies in the dust, bleached by sun and scoured by wind, what will it say to those who find it? Will it speak of wisdom earned through listening, of lives saved through careful words, of love expressed in meaningful moments? Or will it whisper the saddest epitaph of all? Talking brought me here. This is the story of the talking skull. It is a story about words and silence, about pride and humility, about warnings heeded too late. It is a story as old as speech itself and as relevant as the words you speak today. Remember Emeka, remember the skull, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.
What would you do if you found a talking skull? Should Emeka have kept the secret? Let us know. Drop a comment, let's hear your opinion. If you enjoyed this, hit follow and stick around for more. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support keeps the channel going. Join the community, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new drop. Thanks for watching. Share this with someone who'd love it. Stay inspired, subscribe, and come back for more.